Guys,
So,
I'm Dieter Mason. I have been working in the cloud since 2013 at companies like Google, Netflix, Intuit, and most recently Roku. I'm also one of the FinOps ambassadors.
excellent, excellent. It's good to have you here with us. We were very impressed. We look at your site, and one of the things that just immediately pop up is about the FinOps ambassador, and we have to ask, how someone can become a FinOps ambassador.
I think you need to be volunteered by the foundation. It is not something that you can actively achieve, right? You do a lot of outreach, a lot of public speaking, those kind of things. I know the founder, J.R. Storment, since 2016, well before the founding of the foundation. And in 2016 at reInvent, JR asked me the question, hey, does this cloud financial management have legs? And I said, it's like an industrial kitchen where you have, 6, 8 cooks. And so it has to be cleaned up every day, right? And that applies to the cloud, right? You just don't never finish, If engineers do work, engineers create waste, create anomalies, create challenges, forecasting, and so it's an ongoing effort.
And after you got that title, is anything else that you do that you must do, or?
There's a couple of responsibilities, yes. So first of all, you have to be a certified FinOps practitioner, right, to become an ambassador. So, and in addition, there are ambassador meetings that we have on a monthly basis, right? And there's different regions. There, we just had the North America ambassador meeting, but there's also like a global ambassador meeting. And doing that, the foundation shares information and they may have projects for which they are looking for volunteers, right? And then the ambassadors can volunteer for those and drive these efforts.
Interesting,
That's
interesting.
interesting.
So also we look into your your site also. We also noticed that you were one of the people that were doing FinOps. I think even before it was called FinOps, right? You were like kind of
Correct.
an early day promoter of financial reductions or optimizations. So how was it in those days?
Yeah, I mean, when I left PayPal and I interviewed at various companies, right, I saw there's a bunch of positions open at Google. And I said, like, hey, what's the worst that can happen, right? They tell me no, right? So I applied for a Google position, and Google has an interesting hiring process where they have queues, where you don't actually meet your manager. The queue is completely anonymously interviewed, and then you get, in a sense, randomly assigned to a job that requires that role, right, for which you interviewed. I had the fortune where I was able to meet my future manager briefly. And so when I started working at Google, they realized that their public cloud offering is growing faster then they can build data centers, right? Data centers typically is like a 2-year effort. Um, and so they were looking for internal inefficiencies that they could carve out and assign to the public cloud.
Interesting. And
Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome. And so I'm curious about like how was the transition from that you now that you mentioned about the data centers, have you seen the transition from doing FinOps or doing finance related stuff from data centers to what you are doing now in the public cloud?
Yeah, I mean, public cloud, to be honest, is everything is new, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you knew before, in the data center, we do capacity management, right? Where we are looking at 3 to 5 year forecasts, and then we procure hardware. And the hardware is intentionally over provisioned
Mm-hmm.
so that the workloads can grow into the hardware over the amortization period, right? Of the 3, 4, or 5 years, whatever that period is. And so, for example, at Intuit, we migrated from 26 data centers all into Amazon Web Services public cloud, right? And there have been engineers, right, that have been working for the organization 10, 15 plus years and were extremely successful, right? There are products like TurboTax or QuickBooks that are, my CPA
Yeah.
is using QuickBooks, right? My accountant is using QuickBooks. So these engineers were extremely successful in the data center, and moving to the cloud, they basically have to completely retrain, right? They start fresh. So one thing that we did notice is after the lift and shift migration, we had 24% waste in the cloud, right? And we used 6 waste sensors to determine that. Waste sensors are like little scripts that collect information and store it in a central repository where it then can be surfaced by engineering owner or business owner. And over the course of 4 years, we got the waste down from 24% to under 5%. And we increased the waste sensors from 6 to 34. So we sort of raised the bar, and at the same time, we drove the cloud waste down.
No, that's really interesting. So you basically made a waste detect an automate in-house waste detector for you, and now you are making increasing, let's say, the suite of capabilities for that, and that's super
Exactly.
super interesting. And so now that you mentioned that, the migration that happened on this topic is that now that there is this trend or this debate about the repatriation stuff, so going back to on premises because of the cost of the cloud is too high. What are your thoughts on this topic and on this trend that is going on?
There are a couple of use cases where that may make sense, right? As an ambassador, I do a lot of outreach, right, where I go and talk to a lot of people, typically multiple organizations every week, right? And there are some organizations that were able to move cloud workloads back into a data center quite successfully, but those were niche workloads, Dropbox being one of those examples that moved from the simple storage service on AWS to their own storage solution in a data center, which they can manage more efficiently. When you think about it, the cloud is a managed service. AWS has over 175 products, right? And all these products are managed, right? Someone else is carrying the pager when something goes wrong. And so that comes at a cost. Now, economies of scale can reduce the cost, right? Because AWS has dozens of data centers with hundreds of thousands of virtual machines, so they can reduce the cost. But overall, I think there is sort of like a 20% premium if you compare like for like in a data center to the cloud, and that is the management overhead, right? However, I also consult with Hennepin County in Minnesota. And they found that certain technologies would be very challenging to implement in the data center, specifically text-to-speech or speech-to-text. Those kind of things, building that in a data center would take years. And in the cloud, it's just a product, right? You just use the product and it works for the most part, right? So the elasticity of the cloud has benefits, right? If, for example, TurboTax, the United States has one tax day, which is April 15th, right? And for some reason, people, they sort of file the taxes a couple of days before, right? You can file them anytime after like February, right? Because this is when your tax records come in, employee and those kind of things, right? So you can file them anytime, but most people like file them, 1-2 days or on tax day, right? So Intuit had this huge problem that they needed to have the data center capacity for the tax day. And then the rest of the year, this was unused, right? And in the cloud, you can simply scale up maybe 2 weeks before tax day, right? And then you're ready, you have the capacity. And then after tax day, you can release that capacity, which also means that you are not going to be billed. So that elasticity has the benefit that you can scale up, but it also has, in a sense, the opportunity that if something is unused, you need to turn it off. Otherwise, you still incur a cost.